Hello, welcome everyone. Big thanks to Graham yesterday for talking about the snippet tool. I didn't even realize that thing existed in Windows, so that's awesome. So that's kind of the equivalent of this Command Shift 4 thing that we were playing with yesterday to make screenshots on the Mac. The idea behind all of this is obviously to create images and things like that eventually, and I figured it'd be a good point to talk about Photoshop. So Photoshop's my favorite. It's been my favorite for like 20 years. A little bit longer actually. And then I figured I'd talk about the JPEGs and PNGs and GIFs and just give you a bit of context around pixels. So bear with me as I try and explain all this stuff. I've picked an image here, which is basically a park image that I took probably last year sometime. So there's just got some things in there that we can look at, and it'll show up on the compression as well. So we'll open up Photoshop, and we'll get that one open up as well. And if you can see the original image that you get is 4,000 pixels by 2,200 pixels, right? And that's the original image that we get here. So there's lots of detail. You can read Taylor and Tau and MLC. All those things are very readable. There's lots of pixels here. And obviously, as an image size, this image is 26 megabytes. So it's massive if you wanted to use it on a website. Therefore, we do a few things. Now, initially, you might not want to crop this, but I'm just going to start with a crop just to get us going. You could grab this image and then resize it, but what I'll do first is I'm going to grab the crop tool, and from there I'm just going to make sure that I make a selection, and that selection is going to be around about this 16:9 ratio thing, so it's a bit rough, but you can put the ratios in there if you want. You can pick the 16:9 and that'll do it for you. But in case you forget, right, I'm just showing you if you forget and you make it a little bit, got to clear the ratio. If you make it a little bit taller than it should be, it's not the end of the world, we can fix it. The other thing I like is these grids, and particularly changing the grids to the golden ratio. Um, that tighter fitting kind of thing works better for me. So it's just a personal preference. You do whatever you want. And then what I want to do is if I just crop this image anywhere, like here, it doesn't it's not as interesting as it could be because there's a lot of things that are basically fighting for that space. But if I was to do this whole thing all over again and crop it and position my intersecting lines there, not this one, sorry, I'm dragging the wrong thing, intersecting lines on MLC, then I'll just make this a little bit smaller so that actually works. And use the keyboard to nudge it, the arrow keys. Okay, so that'll be right on the MLC. So when I crop this, you should get a feel for, oh wow, that's kind of smack bang in the middle. That's what the person who made the image wanted me to see. Once we've done that, let's go and have a look at the image size. So the image size here is in centimeters. I want to change it to pixels. It doesn't let me change it to pixels because I need to have resample on. So I get resample to turn on, go back in here, turn it over to pixels, and then I can actually see the pixel values. Now what I want is I want this to be the 960 pixel width because then it'll only be 1.6 meg uncompressed from the original, which we just had a moment ago, which was 6, which was already down from 20 something before we cropped it. So we're getting the size down, steadily. But as I kind of go through this, there's also some options around how you're gonna, sharpen the image. So if you did smooth gradients, it'll do that. If you do bicubic smoother, it'll do that. So you can just play around and look at all those things that you want when you're doing this. But really, we're doing a bicubic sharper because we're trying to get all those little leaves to still pop out, and you want Taylor and everything to be readable. So we'll click OK, and there's our image. Now that image is at 33%. So what we want to do is we want to zoom in. So Command plus just zooms you in, or Control plus on Windows. And then when you get into this larger image, okay, this is the one I actually want to export for my website. So I go to File. I've got some export options here, which is like a quick PNG, and that does the job. I've got another option here of export as, but I want to show you this save for web legacy because it'll just show us a couple of options at the same time. So if we go to the 4-up view, we can actually see what the original looks like, the 1.6 meg file. we can see what the JPEG at 2% quality looks like, which is tiny. It's like 0.03 of a meg. Then we've got this one, which is it's 1% quality. So let's just change that to something bigger, like 60. And then I'll change this one over to 100% quality. Now the size goes from 2% to 60%, goes 4 times bigger. From 60% to 100%, so 40% more, goes 2.5 times bigger, 3.5 times bigger. It's sizable, but it's still 400 kilobytes of an original 1.6, so that's a quarter of the original size. So then you have to make a decision which of these is starting to look ugly. And I don't know if it'll come out on the video, so play around with this at home on your own images. But you should be able to see that the MLC logo that's nice and crisp becomes destroyed, and these little squares come and pop all over it, etc. If you look at the one that's 60%, it's pretty similar to the one at the top, but it's not as good as the 100% one, because you start getting these gray areas and you start getting a little bit more of this weirdness around the edges. So at that point you can select that one and mess around with the quality and go, okay, what happens at 37%? Okay, the size is smaller, but it still doesn't look as as at an acceptable level. But don't be tricked at looking at it at this kind of zoom, because this is 600% zoomed in. If you zoom back out to 100%, this is really what people will see. And the smaller the file size, the faster it'll load and the better experience it'll be for the people. So you just got to keep that in mind as you work on these and export them out. And again, you got to be sure that what you're trying to kind of achieve here is the right thing. Now, one other thing to mention is that you can export this out as other formats. So you can export this out as a PNG 8, which is this table of 256 colors. Basically, it gets reduced down to that. In a PNG, you can go down 8 colors. You can get some cool effects that way as well. Just because you're reducing the amount of colors that you're using, so your whole palette's made up of just these 8 colors. You can go down to a duotone thing here as well and see what that looks like. So there's some cool things you can achieve anyway. The best use of that I've seen is for rollovers. So students will have they'll have these black and white duotone kind of thumbnails, and when someone rolls their mouse over it, pops out with the full color one, making it a little bit more exciting to click on and explore. So those are kind of cool things you can do. But note that the PNG at 256 colors, which isn't even the full color palette as the original, is nearly 300 kilobytes. It's massive. So you don't want to use this unless you really need to. And the PNG 24 is even bigger, because the 24 version is 800 kilobytes, but it has all the full color range. So yes, it's half of the original, yet it still isn't as good as a JPEG for photos. If you want to use PNGs, you can use them for logos and other things that need transparencies, because they do exceptionally well with those. The reason for that being that any flat colors that a PNG encounters, it can make the file size really small by just saying, oh look, I've got a lot of this color in this area, and it makes the file really small. GIF is another version of this, which you'll see in the list as well. So you can have a GIF, and again, these are the colors. You need to use a GIF if you want to have like an animated GIF. Then you need to have, like, if you have animations, then you need to use a GIF. That'll be the only thing that'll save animations. Otherwise, you're pretty much good to use a PNG for graphics, and you should be using a JPEG for photos. And that should kind of make it a little bit easier for you. So again, play around with this tool. It's really great. When you click save, it'll save out the one that you've got selected. So if you've got the JPEG selected, it'll try and save that. If you've got the GIF selected, etc. And that'll allow you to start understanding how you're going to be creating the different image assets for your web page, or your web pages, and anything that you want to kind of showcase. The better a job you do at this, the faster the page will load, the better the experience for the user. If you forget to do this, it'll still work. It'll just be downloading that big 26 megabyte file, and most people don't have the patience to wait for that, so they're just going to click off, go somewhere else. So you got to be a little bit mindful of your end users. remember that the images, they load instantly on your own computer when you're building this thing because they are on your computer, so they don't need to download. But when you actually put this up on a website somewhere and someone needs to connect to it and download all of your images, that's when you start to see how slow it actually is. So optimizing your graphics and using Photoshop for that is a great idea, just because it makes the experience better. So anyway, check it out, play around with it. Let me know if you want more Photoshoppy things. Happy to do those as well as we kind of truck along with this whole website diary thing. But definitely something you want to get good at and understand as you make more of these websites, because it'll just make them run better and have more happy customers. So thanks again, and I will see you guys later. Bye.